I don't know how it happened, but it did. When I touched Mira, she did everything I wanted her to. Hi, it's Dan again, and today I'm telling you part 2 of my story. I bet you're wondering what happened to my wife and what Mira meant when she said they instead of she. But before I get to the rest of my story, don't forget to subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up and hit that notification bell icon to show your support for me. I shook Mira to get her to talk to me. Where's Nina? What did you do to her? Mira's eyes suddenly became blank. It was as if she'd checked out of her own body. And then, with a lifeless expression, she answered me. She's there at home. They? What do you mean? I shook her shoulders again. Mira's voice was monotonous. She said it without emotion. It was like I was listening to a robot. You have a son. Your wife and your son are at my house. My husband is with them. My brain was flooding with all different kinds of emotions. She just confessed? Just like that? And I had a son? What horrors was my wife going through right now? But what was in front of me puzzled me. Why was she telling me all this with hardly any provocation? Nevertheless, I decided I needed to rescue my family without delay. I grabbed Mira's hand and dragged her out of the house. Take me to them, now! She drove us to her house. All the way she was just quiet, as if she was under some spell. I told her to open the door, and she did. I rushed into the house. Where are they? In the basement. I burst through the basement doors, and as soon as I saw them, I burst into tears. For 5 long years, I was living with someone else while my wife was locked in that basement. She gave birth to our son there, and he grew up in that dark room. I hugged them and kissed them and apologized. But my son didn't even know who I was. Suddenly, Mira snapped out of the spell. She screamed, "Help! Jeff! Jeff, help me! They're gonna escape! Tan's gonna take them away!" I heard Mira's husband running downstairs, and when he appeared at the basement doors, his face had a look of fear and shock. Mira and Jeff took me by the arms. I fought against them, trying to get back to my family. No! I'm taking them out of here! Let me go! It was a chaos of screams and kicks, but Jeff was much stronger than me. I was able to grab a hold of Mira and screamed at her. Stop! Stop this! As if by magic, Mira suddenly grew as quiet as stone and just stood there, looking into the distance. I looked down at my hands. I touched her again and commanded, "Sit." Mira sat, and all of a sudden, I figured out what I could do. Jeff lunged at me again, and I touched him on the face as I dodged. Fall down. And Jeff fell down. He didn't move a muscle. That was when my son began crying. Daddy! 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 I thought he was calling me, but when I looked back, I saw him crawling towards Jeff. I broke down, sobbing. My own son. My son didn't even know I was his dad. I wanted to touch him. I wanted to make him know that I was his real father, but Nina cried out, "No!" I looked at the woman I loved. I looked at my wife, and her eyes were begging me. That was the first time I ever heard her yell. All I needed to know was in her pleading eyes. No, Tan, please, don't. Don't do that to our son. What? Why? He needs to know. Tan, you did it to me. And our lives together flashed before my eyes. All the way back to the moment I told her I liked her. To that one moment when I touched her hand and said I wished she'd love me back. And even to the moment I held hands with the triplets and told them that I wished our parents would marry each other. My whole life I'd had that ability. And it was no wonder life went so smoothly for me. I walked out of that house defeated. My wife was kept in that house against her will at first. But as time passed, my spell on her wore off. And she understood what happened eventually and fell in love with Jeff. Did I ruin their lives without knowing it? Did I ruin my son's life? I didn't want to take him away from that house that he knew. I didn't want to take him from the man he knew as his dad. So I walked away. Nina and Jeff got married, and I moved far away from our town, scared that I would somehow affect other people's lives with my cursed touch. I bought a villa on top of a remote cliff. The only people I interacted with were either online or when I ordered takeout. I thought the world was safe from me. Until one day, I decided to order pizza and all the walls I built up came tumbling down. I thought it'd just be an ordinary night of me sitting in front of my TV eating pizza, but when the bell rang and I opened the door, I saw the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. But something was wrong. The moment she saw me, she started to cry. Her eyes were wide with fear. Please, please, you have to hide me, please. What? What's wrong? I'll tell you everything, but please, you have to hide me now. Without thinking, I grabbed her hand and pulled her in. She crashed onto me and I couldn't help but feel how soft and smooth her skin was against mine. I felt my heart skip a beat. I quickly closed the door and we awkwardly pulled away from each other. It was too late when I noticed I had touched her, and I recoiled as if I'd touched something that burned me. That puzzled her. I'm sorry. You're just too hot. There were tears running down her face, but that cheesy comment made her laugh out loud. I'm just kidding. Not that I'm saying you're not hot, but, I was being too familiar. We, just met. Sorry? It's nothing to be sorry about. Thanks. Thanks for saving me. She put her hair behind her ear and looked down. She attempted to hide the fact that she was blushing in vain. Her whole face was red at my... Sit down. Why were you crying? Gabriella had a lot of troubles. She received a text from her neighbors that her ex was waiting at her apartment. She told me how her ex used to steal from her so he could spend it all in some casino. He even threatened to take their son away if she didn't give him any money. That night, her son was safe at her parents' house, but she was afraid that her ex would wait until she came home and hurt her. She'd been avoiding him for weeks, and she was sure that he was only back for one thing, and that was more money. She had nothing left to give him. She even had to take shifts as a pizza delivery lady just to afford her son's tuition. We told each other's life stories, and we got really close in just that one night. Before we went to sleep, she kissed me, and I kissed her back. I whispered in her ear that I wished she was my wife. I woke up the next morning to the smell of bacon. It was Gabriella. She'd cooked me breakfast. That made me smile. I only said it as a half-meant joke, but I guess she really looked like she fit the role of my wife quite nicely. I greeted her. Good morning, Gabby. Good morning, husband. I hope you don't mind. I made bacon and eggs for breakfast. And when she looked at me, her eyes were glazed over and blank. Her voice was monotonous and her smile looked unnatural. Shivers ran up and down my spine. I did it again. I wanted to set everything right, so I ran out of my house. Eventually the spell would wear off and she'd snap out of it. I just hope she doesn't blame me for it. I decided I would do something worthwhile for once, and I hoped Gabby would forgive me when I told her the truth about my powers. If nothing else, this was the kind of situation that I could actually put my powers to good use. She told me where she lived, and so I rushed there. I wanted to get her ex to leave her alone. That was all. But when I got there, nobody answered her door. The neighbor came out to find out who I was, and when I asked where Gabby's ex was, what she told me shook me to my core. He ran out of there screaming, said he was going to take his son no matter what, said he was going to take his son back even if he had to kill someone. I saw him driving towards Gabby's parents' house. In a panic, I asked for directions. It was a 5-minute drive, but it felt like I flew there in 5 seconds. I burst through the door and I realized I'd just gotten there in time. Gabby's son was in his dad's arms, and Gabby's ex was pointing a knife at the old couple. The guy jumped at the sound of the door, and when he looked at me, his eyes were crazy. Who are you? Get out of here! He pointed the knife at me. I slowly made my way towards him. Not one more step! Whoever you are! I made to grab the knife off of him, but he was faster than me. He jumped at me, letting go of his son, and then he pinned me to the ground. We struggled for a while, and the kid and his grandparents screamed for help, but I finally was able to grab his hand. Drop the knife. He did. Walk out of this house and never bother Gabriella or this family ever again. Without another sound, he stood and walked away. Everyone was in shock, but I explained everything to them. I told them that Gabby was staying at my house and that I should let her know what happened. At first, Gabby didn't understand what had happened, but I sat her down and told her my whole story. I told her what I did. She didn't even care that I'd accidentally kept her at my house. She thanked me for saving her and her son. And you know what she told me that day? You wouldn't have had to use magic. I would have said yes anyway. Gabby and I got married, and I legally adopted her son. And guess what? He's also named Dan.